What's up, everybody, and thanks for checking out the Nonstop Sports Podcast. I'm Kyrie Thompson. I write about Chicago sports for Fanside. It's the Windy City page and formerly ChiCitySports.com, and about sports generally on Rotodead.com. I'm here to give you some of my nonstop sports thoughts, and if you want, you should let me know some of yours so that we could talk about those as well. You can follow me at KDThompson5 on Twitter and at KyrieDT on Instagram. I just got the Instagram set up, so bear with me right there. Trying to turn over a new leaf and check out as many of these social websites as I can so I can share my stuff with you. I'll post my podcast episodes on the social media sites and on SoundCloud. So when I get that going, I'll tell you all how you can subscribe to the podcast if you like it. For now, though, I want to jump right in and get to talking about some NFL stuff. First of all, thank goodness football is back. Summer, I love baseball. I love the NBA, especially the NBA Finals, NBA free agency, all of that. But even with all the issues surrounding football, it's awfully tough not to love it. And, it's always been my favorite sport. So I always look forward to this time of year. First to the beginning of the college football season, which I was never really into until I actually went to Notre Dame. And then, how can you not be into college football if you go to Notre Dame? That's one of the meccas of, college football for all time. But mainly the NFL is the sport that I follow the most. So this is my time of year. Anyway, I want to get into some rookie quarterback performances. We had the top 4 guys from last year's draft: Chicago's Mitch Trubisky, Kansas City's Pat Mahomes, and the 2 DeShones. Houston Texans' Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns' DeShone Kizer. They all made their debuts last week. Pretty solid across the board as first impressions go, and hopefully, they can quiet some of those early whispers about this being a weak quarterback class. But we'll see. After all, it was only one preseason game, and we have to see how they respond to some of the next challenges that their teams put in front of them. But for now, it was a very interesting performance for all 4 of those guys. Hopefully many more to go. There were 2 performances in particular that I want to talk about that I have some connection to. First off, we have the obvious, right? I'm a Chicago sports guy, so I'm talking about Mitchell Trubisky. I've written about him a couple of times, and obviously I've been following him ever since the Chicago Bears drafted him, trying to find out as much as I can about the way that he's performing and whether or not he could possibly be ready to play sooner than people think. And from everything that I've heard, actually, it does seem like Mitchell Trubisky is doing a lot better than a lot of people anticipated. So I'm telling you right now, I believe that Mitch Trubisky is going to play football at some point this season. Book it. But I'll get to that later. I don't want to spoil anything, right? So then let's move on to the next guy. I'm also a Notre Dame grad. I just graduated 2 Sundays ago. Thank goodness, by the way. So DeShone Kizer is my guy. I've had a chance to watch nearly every one of his college snaps. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly that come with his game. I've also seen enough to know that 4-8 season that everybody gets caught up on with him, he took accountability for it. The fact that he could have played better. As the quarterback of Notre Dame, there's a lot of expectation put on your shoulders. But I saw enough of that team to know that a lot of it needed to be taken with context regarding his play. That was not a good Notre Dame football team last year, and DeShone Kizer was forced, and also partly forced himself, to do a lot of things that he ought not to have done to try to keep that team afloat. And so far, despite all of the criticism that he got and all of the critiques about his game, saying he wasn't ready, he needed a red shirt year, maybe 2, before he actually got a chance to step on the field and be successful, he's acquitted himself really well with the Cleveland Browns so far, and it appears like he is on the verge of winning a quarterback battle to start in week 1. Not bad for a couple of guys that everyone thought wasn't ready to play, right? I mean, they've got a little bit more to show, but I think that at this point, you've got to be fairly impressed with the way they've handled themselves. So before I get into their performances, because I actually want to, break down a little bit of what I saw from their games, from their throws, I want to do a little bit of background about their situations, how they kind of got to this spot where they're at right now, kind of battling, to start or just to move up the depth chart. Who did it better in their first games? Because I was impressed by both, but I do have an opinion about which one I thought actually was a little bit more impressive, though they were both impressive in, slightly different ways. And then, what does the future look like for these two guys? Are they going to start week one for their teams? Are they going to maybe start later? Does it look like, they're the kinds of guys that could step in immediately and make a difference for their team? So it's going to be pretty interesting. Let's start off with Mitch Trubisky. Okay, so second overall pick in 2017. That was the big splash of the draft, for sure. And it was very surprising, obviously, that the Chicago Bears were the ones that did it. Particularly because, the Bears are known as, kind of this defensive franchise, and everybody was thinking, the Chicago Bears need to go in and they need to upgrade their secondary. People were talking about Jamal Adams. People were talking about upgrading the defensive line, too, with Solomon Thomas, Jonathan Allen. There was really no serious discussion, aside from possibly DeShone Watson, about the Chicago Bears drafting a quarterback with the number 3 overall pick, which is what they originally held going into this draft. Then, get to draft night. Bears trade up one spot. Everybody thinks that, it could be Solomon Thomas, though, I don't know, why would you give up 3 draft picks to get Solomon Thomas, right? And then, it started to kind of dawn on people, maybe they were about to draft a quarterback. And then you think it's going to be Watson. Based on everything that the Bears have kind of put out there before the draft, it's interesting to think about this now. It seemed like the arrow was pointing towards Watson the entire time. Guys that elevated the program. Guys that had, a lot of starting experience. Guys that were, ready to play, as much as possible. And Deshaun Watson, at least from kind of the college number standpoint, fit that bill. Then they announced Mitch Trubisky. Now, I've got to tell you, not getting into everybody else's reaction just yet, just my personal reaction, I was stunned. I was absolutely floored. Like, people in the room with me when that happened, my jaw dropped. I couldn't speak, when that happened. And then I was immediately wondering, and as did everybody else, if the Bears got fleeced on this trade. If John Lynch, San Francisco 49ers new GM, just pulled one over on the Bears and kind of bluffed them into making this move. And that's certainly the opinion that a lot of people had. People were looking at this trade thinking, why would you trade up for Trubisky? Because at this point, they could have probably, there's a decent chance they could have gotten him still at number 3. Because I don't think that the San Francisco 49ers were necessarily sold on drafting a quarterback that high. So there was a lot of controversy about that and a lot of second guessing of, the Chicago Bears front office. Just to recap that trade a little bit. 49ers got the 3rd overall pick. They got the 67th overall pick from the Bears, the 111th overall pick, which was a 4th rounder, and they got a 2018 3rd round pick. So, that certainly was quite a bit to give up. But if you look at some of the trade charts that people do where they document the numbers, in the end, the Bears still kind of come out on the right side of it. Well, I mean, from a number standpoint, they do come out on the right side of it. They get more value with the number 2 pick than all those other picks combined. So, just from a pure number standpoint, whatever you think about the pick itself, there's actually a solid argument that the Bears did win that trade. Anyway, let's get back to who was taken. So 49ers get Solomon Thomas. They traded up from their 67th pick to get Alabama's Reuben Foster. Then they used their 3rd round pick on Iowa's C.J. Beathard, which, don't ask me why they decided to do that. To me, C.J. Beathard was kind of a borderline, like mid-round, late round, almost like borderline undrafted, free agent kind of pick. So, I mean, whatever. That's how they evaluated it. Good for them. But then for giving up those players, the Bears got a guy who could be the franchise quarterback. The more I let that part sink in, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, like here in a few minutes, I really thought that was a strong move because Ryan Pace identified his guy and he went for it. And I'll talk about why I think that's a good thing in a bit. So a lot of people were also wondering, what was Ryan Pace thinking here? You just signed Mike Glennon to a $45 million deal to be your starter. Why would you draft a rookie then? Why are you inviting a quarterback controversy? Then people were talking about his lack of experience, which is a fair point. He only had 13 starts at North Carolina, so he was relatively inexperienced from that standpoint, even though he had some relief experiences in his first couple of years where he kind of came in and he made some really nice plays. So a lot of people were very negative about this trade, very down on it. I'll tell you what, though. I actually wrote about this in the pre-draft period, and it's funny to look back on this now that I actually go back and reread this article. The Bears needed this. As a franchise, from a history standpoint, they absolutely needed to do this. Because for so long, they have relied on guys like Mike Glennon to shape their future. And to basically, let's ride a good defense and, just have a middling quarterback or a bad quarterback. And we're just going to win with defense and we're just going to manage the game. The NFL doesn't work like that anymore, guys. I'm sorry. That's not how this is going to go. That's not how you win today. You need good quarterback play. Maybe you don't need it every single week because in the end you get to the playoffs and defense becomes more premium. But you need good quarterback play to get a shot. And the fact that Ryan Pace put himself out there and made this move tells me that it's not about a year-to-year thing. For him, it's about competing for the future and competing for a long period of time. Having the kind of guy who, I'm not saying that he's going to be Aaron Rodgers or he's going to be the next all-time great, but the kind of guy that can give you a shot to win the division or get a wild card spot every single year that he's the starter. Okay? That's what the Bears were going for, and I'm very interested, obviously, to see if that's how it turns out. So, let's skip to DeShone Kizer right now and a little bit of his background. Despite some of the criticism that he endured about his maturity, his inaccuracy, why did Notre Dame go 4-8, all that stuff, right? He was still the fourth quarterback off the board. He just went a lot later than one would think. But I think everybody knew that was a possibility. And I thought that perhaps he might go a little bit sooner than that. Personally, I thought that there might be a chance somebody traded into the back end of the first round to get him or took him earlier on, but he slid down to the 52nd overall pick to the Cleveland Browns. In my mind, that's incredible value for a guy with his kind of upside, his kind of physical talent. Pat Mahomes is the only guy in this draft that I would say had a better arm than DeShone Kizer and could make some of the kinds of plays that he could make. And then you throw in his physical build. He is a big, 6'4", 225, 230-pound quarterback. This is a big man. Not just that, but he's also very underrated in terms of his athleticism. I think that that's something that when you watch him play, you can see how athletic he is. And I don't think he always gets a lot of credit for it. They just kind of think of him as a big body. And yet guys like Mel Kiper, when this pick came up, still had qualms about taking him, even at that point, which I don't understand. Where else do you think he would go? You're taking him in the third round? You're going to let him slip all the way there? Or are you going to take Davis Webb or Nate Peterman first? Come on. He arguably, as a quarterback and, as an overall football player, was easily good enough to be in that top three and be a first-round pick. It was just kind of the execution and some of the questions about him. So, in my mind, it's come on. Why would you be upset with him going in the second round? And the other good part about this is, look what situation he comes into. They draft him 52nd overall. So, then there's the assumption that, he doesn't have to play right now. The pressure isn't quite the same as it's going to be, with Mitchell Trubisky, who's the second overall pick. So, he's going to be the franchise guy. That's the guy you want. He comes in, and Hugh Jackson takes him under his wing. And Hugh Jackson is as good as a quarterback's coach as you'll find in the NFL. And he didn't baby him. From day one, every report I read is that Hugh Jackson put it on his plate, and he challenged him from day one to get it going. And DeShone Kizer really took to it. Right now, he's battling with Brock Osweiler mainly, and Cody Kessler as well, for playing time. But he's starting to get first-team reps in Cleveland after his performance last Thursday. He was getting some before as well, but now the focus has really started to shift in that way. And so he has a real chance to prove that he can be the guy that can start for the Cleveland Browns in Week 1. And in my opinion, this actually goes for both guys, Mitch Trubisky and DeShone Kizer. They, in my mind, are the best quarterbacks on their team. They definitely have the best upside of any of the quarterbacks on the roster. But I think just in terms of performance and what they can give you on the field, yeah, they might be a little bit raw. Kizer perhaps more so than Trubisky. But I still think that both guys are the best options for their team, and it's just a matter of whether or not their coaches end up seeing the same thing. So let's talk a little bit about their performances and kind of who do I think was a little bit more impressive. Who showed themselves to be more NFL ready at this point. Now, obviously, disclaimer with this, right? They both played, the entire second halves of their games against reserves, like third stringers, third, fourth string guys, whatever. So they're not playing against the cream of the crop here. Basically, it's about looking at not just the statistics and, not just the numbers of it, because, Mitch Trubisky started off 10 for 10, which is great when you just look at the stats, themselves and finished, 18 for 25. You can look at all that, right? What I'm looking at are the traits. What did they show me in terms of the way that they played the game? And so, yeah, there will be a little bit of kind of the statistical argument in there, but for me, I want to tell you a little bit about when I watched them play, what did I see? So let's go ahead and start off with Mitch Trubisky for the Chicago Bears. Just to put it out there, right now, I actually think that Trubisky's performance was a little bit more impressive than Kizer's. Not, again, this is not against DeShone Kizer because, DeShone Kizer's my guy, so I'm kind of biased towards both of them in a way. But I'll tell you why I think that his performance was a little bit more interesting. Though there's also an argument to be made for DeShone Kizer if you want to go that route. Anyway, about Mitchell Trubisky. So, first of all, Trubisky came in at an interesting time during his first preseason game. So it was actually the Bears' last possession before the half. And you kind of would have figured, just as with DeShone Kizer, like, okay, he's probably going to come out, to start the second half and just play the entire second half, and we'll go from there, right? Well, they actually brought him on just before halftime, and the reason basically was that Chicago Bears quarterbacks up to that point were dreadful. So you had Mike Glennon going 2 for 8 for 20 yards and a 0 passer rating. Threw a pick six on his second, pass attempt of the game. Just generally could not get the offense to generate anything. And then Mark Sanchez came in. He went, 1 of 4. So the quarterbacks weren't getting anything done until Trubisky came into the game. And then it was immediate. Like the moment he came into the game, everything changed. So he goes 4 for 4, and he throws for his first touchdown just before the half. A nice little out route to Victor Cruz on the rollout in the goal line. Then, comes out after halftime, completes his next 6 passes to go 10 for 10, and then it tails off a little bit from there, especially as the Bears defense kind of started to give the game away. A couple of dropped passes out there, and a couple of batted balls. And in the end, they couldn't pull out the victory. But Trubisky's performance, in so many ways, like it's hard to think of anything he could have done better. Basically, I can think of one thing, that stands out that he could have done a little bit better or, was a little bit of a blight on it. And that was the fact that he had a couple of balls batted down at the line of scrimmage, particularly, on his last couple of possessions, right? And that's going to be something that, you wonder about because he's not the tallest guy. He's about 6'2". He's a little over 6'2". So getting him on the run the way that they were doing in this game might be, kind of a better option to, stop that from happening. But anyway, aside from that, though, his arm talent was outstanding. What I loved about Trubisky and the way that he operated, so first of all, he was decisive. I think that's the number one thing that's going to, get you excited about the possibility of Trubisky playing right away, is the fact that he came into this game, whether he was doing it against third stringers or whatever, right? By the way, he's going to get more opportunities against the second team and a little bit of first team action in these close practices and in the preseason. I can bet you he's at least going to move up the depth chart a little bit. Anyway, he was doing 5-step drops, hitting his back foot, and letting the ball go immediately. He was not wasting any time. He was reading the defense. He was seeing what was there. He was processing it quickly and not hesitating. He was getting the ball out of his hands like that. His first, actually no, it was his second completion of the game. He throws a comeback route to Josh Bellamy, where it was exactly like that. He gets to the back of his drop. The moment he hits his back foot, he anticipates the throw. So he hits it, plants, throws, boom, hits Bellamy. Bellamy makes a guy miss, and then, turns it into a 15-yard gain. But it was that decisiveness that was impressive. He had another play on a deep end. He was finding, backup receiver Deontay Thompson all day, by the way. So this is a common thing. Hits him on a deep end route where he first of all, he reads the whole field. So he goes through his progressions, and then he sees the deep end open up and waits for the window to open, with a linebacker sitting in coverage, and then just drills the throw in, behind him for, another big gain. That was as NFL ready of a throw as you can have for a rookie quarterback. And then I also loved the way that he threw on the move. This was the kind of thing that, enticed the Bears, in regards to his athleticism for a while. The fact that he is a very athletic guy. He actually outran, DeShone Watson, who's the running quarterback, right? Outran him at the combine. And then you look at the way that he's very accurate. He was very accurate on the move in college as well, and he showed that off here. And Dowell Loggins, the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, utilized that to perfection. And in particular, in talking about him throwing on the move, this opens up another part of the conversation. Mitchell Trubisky has this incredible feel for what throw to make at what given time, like what type of throw. And I mean that in terms of, are you rifling it or are you lobbing it in there? Is there touch or are you putting it on the line? So on two plays that were more or less the same in terms of, being a rollout to the right off of a bootleg action, he hits, the same receiver along the right sideline, but he does it in two entirely different ways that were both incredibly impressive to me. So the first one was, arguably the throw of the night for me. So he fakes handoff left, rolls out to the right. It's fairly free out there. No one is closing in on him, so he has plenty of time to scan the field. He had Victor Cruz coming across on an underneath route, but he chose to go with the deeper route because Deontay Thompson was open on a sideline comeback. And he drills it in there from, almost 20 yards out behind the line of scrimmage on the run, perfectly on the sideline. It was a laser beam. Hits him on the sideline, perfect toe tap. And again, I'm not saying that he's at this level right now because he literally just played one preseason game. But that throw was Rodgers-esque. That's the kind of stuff that Aaron Rodgers does. And, Trubisky showed it for just one play on that particular drive, but that was incredible. And then on an almost identical play, in terms of, kind of the general scheme of it, again, fakes left, rolls out to the right. This time, defender in his face. Defensive end closes on him. This time, he's got Thompson running, kind of a little bit of a shallower route, towards the sideline, instead of trying to laser it. In this case, if you try to throw it hard, maybe you overthrow or you throw it into the ground. He lofts it into space and lets his receiver run under it. And Thompson runs and makes, kind of a sliding catch there along the sideline. But again, it's just this instinctive feel for knowing in a situation, just kind of calibrating it on the fly, knowing I can't make that exact same throw that I tried to make last time, and I shouldn't try to. So let me just give my guy an opportunity to make a play in space. He floats it out there, and the guy makes a play. It was, this is the kind of stuff that has had me saying for a long time that Mitchell Trubisky is the best passer on the Bears roster right now. He's the best passer. Neither Mike Glennon nor Mark Sanchez have the kind of arm talent that he does and have the ability to be as accurate on the run or in the pocket as he does. He's simply just a better thrower of the football. In my mind, there's no way around that. Now, the question with Trubisky is going to be, is he going to be the best quarterback on the roster? He was the best quarterback in last Thursday's game. That part is not really up to debate for me. I don't care. You can adjust it for, what teams are out there, quality of play, whatever. I don't care because I watched that game and I saw that he was the best quarterback on the team, if only for that day. Now, obviously that could change. Mike Glennon could come out and have a real nice, solid bounce-back game, and Mitch Trubisky might regress a little bit this coming Saturday when they play their next preseason game. That could definitely happen. No one's ruling that out. At the same time, I think that it's totally already fair to assume that from what I've seen, and again, just from the traits displayed by those guys, that Mitchell Trubisky is the best quarterback on this team right now, and that if you are interested in winning, if winning is the most important thing to John Fox and he wants to keep his job, he eventually is going to have to turn to Mitch Trubisky. And I think that Mitch Trubisky is probably going to end up starting more than half the games this season because he's better than Mike Glennon. People look at it like, Mike Glennon's experience, so he should get the first crack at it. Mitch Trubisky, it's all hype for now. He had one good game, but that's really not a big thing. That's not really what I've been hearing. I do know a couple of people that go to the Bears training camps, as kind of credentialed reporters, and they get to see these guys in action. And basically what I continue to hear, despite what you might be hearing from the major networks and, kind of people, in the local media or whatever, pushing the narrative that, Mitch Trubisky has such a long way to go, he's not ready, blah, 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 is that Mike Glennon is the leader, he's the team guy, he's Mr. Experience, even though, if you want to be real about it, Mike Glennon has about as much experience as, a typical rookie quarterback when it comes to starting. He stood around on the sidelines and watched plenty of games, but he really hasn't played that much to be listed as an experienced guy. So he's the experienced guy, clubhouse leader, all that stuff, but he's not that good of a quarterback. In the end, you hear people talk about his work habits and how he's got a sense of urgency and whatever. But very rarely are you hearing things that Mike Glennon's a really good quarterback. He's just some dude that, basically they brought in to be a placeholder and they ended up getting their guy. Mike Glennon means nothing to the Bears' future, in my mind. He has $16 million guaranteed out of $18.5 guaranteed in his whole contract this year. So they can get rid of him the moment the season is over. If they wanted to, they could just eat $18 million right now, though I don't really see that happening. So I think that just based on what I've seen, Mitchell Trubisky is going to play for the Chicago Bears this year. This is not going to be a redshirt season. So I think we can kind of dispense with that narrative because, Mike Glennon is not good enough, for the Bears to ride with him for a full season. And also, the NFL is an unpredictable place. People are going to get hurt, and that's just kind of how it's going to go. So Mitch Trubisky is going to play, and I wouldn't be surprised, again, if after Week 8, especially if the Bears' record is bad, and you know they're not going anywhere, that they put him on the field and just say, show us what you got. So that's kind of my recap on Mitch Trubisky. Let's move over to DeShone Kizer right now. Kizer's case was a little bit interesting because the stats weren't necessarily as pretty. Again, that's not, a really huge deal, right? So, DeShone Kizer went, 11 for 18, whereas Trubisky went, 18 of 25. Kizer threw for a few more yards, but that was largely on the strength of two monstrous deep balls that he had, to get the, Browns on the board, and also to, win the game with that game-winning touchdown pass. So people are going to look at that immediately and say, from that standpoint, Kizer still looks kind of raw, and ultimately his performance was impressive largely on the strength of those deep balls. I am not necessarily looking at it in terms of that. First of all, it certainly looks like, to me, that the Browns put quite a bit on DeShone Kizer's plate and allowed him to operate, and make lots of NFL throws, and really kind of push himself and push his limits. And, there are some plays where it's obvious that, Kizer doesn't necessarily have the same feel that Trubisky does for, how to make certain throws. And not that he can't do it. He has all the, arm strength and, potential arm talent in the world, does DeShone Kizer. But there are a couple of examples of DeShone Kizer overthrowing a few balls. There were a couple of out routes or whatever that were, kind of examples of that. So there was a short out route that he hit on a third down to convert it, for a first down, where he puts it right on the money, right out of the receiver's break, and just, it was an absolute torpedo. You barely saw this ball leave his hands. He generates such easy velocity. The ball just explodes, from his fingers, when he lets it go. There was another out route that was a little bit further down the field where, again, I think the anticipation was good on the throw. He threw it, kind of right out of the receiver's break. Only his guy could get it. And he didn't necessarily miss by much, but he overthrew that one a little bit. I think that, if you kind of put that one a little bit more towards the sideline and put a little bit less mustard on it, that could have been, a nice long completion for Kizer. And that's the kind of thing that, he's just going to have to learn. It's like how, again, to calibrate the situation and know what kind of throw that you've got to make at a given time. At the same time, he was making some big-time throws to the sidelines. Again, I've mentioned the arm strength. He has all the arm strength you could possibly want. He was making out route throws and like kind of fades to the right sideline. He threw one that was perfect, right on the money, that his receiver dropped, unfortunately. So he got it in his hands and got it knocked out by the cornerback. But it was a perfect throw. And that's the kind of stuff that he did at Notre Dame. He liked throwing those kind of sideline fade routes. He also threw some big-time, deep out routes and square ins, even with the game on the line, right? So before he hit the game-winning touchdown pass, it was 3rd down and 24. And Kizer drills a 23-yard pass, on a little in route to get them in position to, at that point, that you could go for the yard or you could go for the win. And they ended up going for the win, and he, throws an absolute just dime on a deep ball with a lot of pressure in his face. So it was more than just the deep balls, that he showed, a lot of accuracy on. It was those kinds of throws that NFL quarterbacks, they got to make. There were throws into tight windows that he was sneaking in, between defenders that were contesting him. Same with Trubisky. He made a couple of really nice throws with defenders all over the receivers, right? But he's making these throws on out cuts, again, 15, 20 yards down the field. It was some impressive stuff. So while I do think that, Kizer is a little bit more raw, he needs to kind of rein in that arm strength a little bit, kind of put things a little bit, less on the line, more touch, kind of put the ball into space a little bit more instead of kind of relying on the cannon. And then, clean up some of the stuff with his footwork, which is still a little bit raw. When he's, backing up in the pocket. He still threw a couple of throws off his back foot a little bit, though he easily had enough arm strength, and, he didn't put the ball in danger. But, these are still little things that I think, his footwork needs to get a little bit more solid. He's a very athletic guy, so he can throw off a number of platforms if he chooses to. And even when he's not perfect with the footwork, he can still make those throws. But I think once his eyes and his arm, get connected with his feet, once that's all, synced up, that guy could easily be the best quarterback, that comes out of this draft. If he continues with that and he gets some of his technique stuff cleaned up. I really believe that. And so the other thing that was really intriguing about Kizer was that, unlike Trubisky, he was under duress a lot. So he's standing in there making throws among just bodies flying everywhere. His first, long pass, it ended up, being close to a touchdown, but it wasn't quite there. He made this throw after, kind of sidestepping the rush. He even pump faked. He showed off that trademark pump fake that he has that reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger, because he's got real big hands. And so he makes this devastating pump fake, which actually draws a safety up, thinking that he was throwing the out cut, and then he launches the ball, to the receiver just right on target, down at the 1 yard line. And then even on his touchdown, he got hit at the end of that too, but he still dropped it in on a dime. He got snowed under at one point where he had to make a throw to the right sideline on an out route, hits that too. And so he's standing in the pocket taking abuse, and he's still delivering dimes. That's the kind of stuff that people were worried about with DeShone Kizer, kind of talking about, his mechanics break down under pressure, and so, we really need to refine his technique so that he's kind of getting, he's not just using his arm and just trying to, kind of throw the ball up and hope something good happens. He was standing in there taking a lot of heat, and he performed very, very well. So when looking at these two guys, it's interesting to see how Trubisky and Kizer both kind of come into a situation where they're both, the number 3 quarterback, right? So you don't want to just give a rookie quarterback a job, just coming out, right? Because they've got to prove themselves, they've got to prove that they can learn NFL offenses, that they can adapt to the speed of the game, and that you don't want to rush a guy because the moment you put him on the field, particularly if you're going to commit to him as a starter, sometimes it's hard to take things back, if things go wrong. Who knows what that could have, what effects that could have for a guy's confidence if he doesn't play well. Now, for these particular guys, I'm not entirely worried because, Mitch Trubisky and DeShone Kizer are incredibly confident guys. And both of them have been through a decent amount of adversity. So I think, they are ready, at least in a mental state, to, handle failure and handle adversity, that they can go on the field and they can continue going about their business and they can make plays. Whereas maybe some of these guys haven't quite failed as much. That's something I wonder about with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson, I wonder about how much he has failed and how he'll adapt to failure. I believe he's a pretty mentally tough guy as well, because he stood in there, for example, against Alabama, and he took abuse for an entire half, did not play well, and yet they came back and won that game largely on his back and his, rebound from that tough time. So I still do wonder about that, though, because he hasn't lost, kind of a whole lot. So, I think from that standpoint, both Kizer and Trubisky, are good enough, from a mental standpoint to play right now. And in terms of their arm talent, they, without a doubt, have the best arm talent of either or any of the quarterbacks on their rosters. The fact that DeShone Kizer, has, better arm talent than, Brock Osweiler and Cody Kessler, that's not even something you should have to think about. And then, Mitch Trubisky, again, seeing it with your own eyes, he is a better thrower of the football than Mike Glennon probably could ever dream of being, if we're going to be completely honest. So, in terms of talent, also, they should be on the field. And maybe they won't start week 1. And even if they don't start week 1, I don't think that that's an indictment on them in particular. And I also think that even if they don't start week 1, they're going to start the majority of these football games this season, barring injury. I think both of them easily start more than half the games this season. Though I think, DeShone Kizer is probably going to get a shot before Trubisky is to start, and then it'll just be a matter of how well he performs. Because the other thing about their situations that are a little bit different, Trubisky is coming in as, the guy that everybody knows is going to be the franchise quarterback. They are very, committed to him in the future. They're building this roster for him in the future. That's why they got guys like Adam Shaheen in the second round, big pass-catching tight end. They want to, and of course it could help Glennon too. But, these are weapons for the future for their franchise quarterback. That's also why they got Tariq Cohen. Because you got Jordan Howard already. He's going to be your bell cow running back. But then you can use Tariq Cohen as kind of, the joker back. You can use him like a Tyreek Hill. He's got that kind of speed and shiftiness and explosiveness. And he's got giant hands and good route running ability. So you can put him, in the slot or even outside for a couple plays if you want and throw him the football and just watch him dance and break people's ankles in space. So Mitch Trubisky is the guy. Number 2 overall pick. That part is pretty secure. DeShone Kizer, not necessarily. They could look at DeShone Kizer this year and say, he was good, but not quite good enough, or, I really don't think that this is the guy that, we were kind of hoping for, and so maybe they're going to chase one of those top guys in next year's draft. Maybe you're holding out hope for a Sam Darnold to decide he wants to go to the NFL, though he's kind of hinting that, don't put your eggs in that basket. Maybe you're looking at, Josh Allen or Josh Rosen, one of those guys who, could be, a top 5 kind of quarterback pick. And maybe, if the Browns are that bad, you have a shot to use some assets on that. If you don't think that DeShone Kizer, is going to be that franchise quarterback. So believe me, they're going to want to find out what DeShone Kizer is before they have to make that kind of decision. Are we going to reboot this and go with another top-ranked quarterback again in the draft and just do it until we get it right? Or, is this second-round pick that we drafted, could he be the guy? And if he is, then that could be one of the steals in draft history, I feel like, getting DeShone Kizer with the 52nd overall pick. But in any case, that's about all the time we've got for today. So thank you for tuning into the Nonstop Sports Podcast. Once again, my name's Kyrie Thompson. Thank you for sharing the time with me, and I hope that you will continue to tune into the podcast when I put out more episodes. And I hope that you'll take some time to interact with me if you like, and tell me about some of the Nonstop Sports thoughts that you have, and we can see about me maybe doing an episode on those. I'm always willing to take some feedback and suggestions. So for now, thank you once again for tuning into the Nonstop Sports Podcast, and we will see you later.